Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week. And if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. In today's tutorial, we're making a classic v-neck sweater. For this sweater, we're using a super pretty stitch combination I've been playing with, a healthy v-neck, and the comfiest casual fit. All things for a perfect crochet sweater, especially during the holiday season. Speaking of, if you're looking for the perfect gift to make, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of gift-ready crochet tutorials and patterns with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 600 grams of yarn, and that's 1,350 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us your favorite season to crochet for. My favorite season ultimately will always be fall. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 3 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, and half double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting the sweater started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5mm hook and start off by making an even number chain that starts 1 inch underneath our underarm down to where we like the bottom of the sweater to be, keeping in mind that we will have a bottom band as well. I'd like for mine to be a full length sweater, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 52, and that's 13 inches or 33 centimeters. Now that we have our chain, we're going to do our first row, which is a half double crochet row. So block off that last chain and start with a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then we're all going to yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet. Insert our hook into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, and pull through. Yarn over, pull through all 3. Let's do one more. Yarn over, into the next chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3. Continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. We've put 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. Now we're all going to do an increase of 3 half doubles into that last chain. So yarn over, into that last chain, pull through 3, a second half double, and a third half double, all into that same last chain. Now we should have 2 more stitches than base chains that we made. Then our following row is going to be an alternate single crochet row. So how that's going to work is chain 2 and flip. Now that chain 2 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. All we're going to do from here is skip that first stitch, into the second stitch, insert with 2 single crochets. There's 1, same stitch, there's 2. Again, we're going to skip that next stitch, into the next, 2 single crochets, there's 1, there's 2, once more, skip a stitch, into the next, with 1, and with a second single crochet. Continue this to reach the end of the row, and our last set of stitches should be worked into the last stitch from our previous row. Our row 2 is complete. We didn't do any increases or decreases, so we should all have the same amount of stitches as our previous row. Now we're going to do a repeat of our 2 previous rows for our underarm portion. Let's do the following 2 to make sure we all got it down. Our row 3 is going to be a half double crochet row. So chain 2 and flip. That chain 2 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then from here we're going to yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet. We are all going to skip that first stitch, and then into that second stitch insert with a half double crochet. We are always going to skip that first stitch because otherwise our work will start to slant. So insert into that second stitch with 1 half double, and continue with 1 half double crochet into every stitch. The last stitch that we're going to work into is going to be that chain space that we made when we got started on our previous row. We made our way down with our row 3. We've put 1 half double crochet into every stitch. Our last stitch should be that chain space, and into that chain space we're all going to do an increase of 3 half doubles. So yarn over, into that last chain space, insert with 1, with 2, and with 3 half double crochets. Now our row 3 is complete. Getting started on row 4, which is our alternate row, chain 2, and flip. The chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch. We're going to skip that first stitch, and into the next we're going to do our first alternate set, which is just 2 single crochets into the same stitch. So there's 1, there's 2. Skip that next stitch, into the next with 1 and 2, and that's it. Continue this to reach the end of the row. And again, since we aren't increasing or decreasing into the alternate row, we should have the same amount of stitches as our previous row. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have an underarm portion that can reach from mid-underarm over to the front of our body, roughly where a bra strap or tank top strap would be. I will meet you guys back when we have that all finished up right after a half double crochet row. Then we can work straight into the shoulder together. We are back. My underarm portion is complete. I have a total of 13 rows. This width is roughly 4 inches or 10 centimeters. Now from here we're going to make a chain that leads all the way up to the top of our shoulder. So making sure that our tail end still stays at 1 inch underneath our underarm because we don't want our armhole to expand, we're going to make an even number chain, and I have already measured mine out. I need roughly 4 inches or 10 centimeters, so I went ahead and made a chain 18. Now my total length is roughly 20 inches or 51 centimeters. Let's get started on our following row in our row sequence, which is an alternate stitch row. Once we have our chain, block off that last chain and chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Now we're going to do our first alternate stitch set into the 3rd chain from our hook. So this is my first chain, this is our second chain, the chain that we blocked off, into the following chain, insert with 2 singles. So insert with 1, insert with a second, and continue on with our alternate stitch to reach the end of the row. So skip that following stitch, into the next with 2 singles, and I'll meet you back at the end. Our first shoulder row is complete. Now we're going to continue to do our previous row and a half double crochet row with no increases and no decreases until this portion can reach the base of our neck. So just getting started on our following half double crochet row, chain 2 and flip. We are going to be skipping that first stitch from our previous row and inserting into that next with a half double crochet. Continue with 1 half double crochet into the rest of our stitches, remembering that our last half double crochet is going to be worked into that chain space that we made when we started off our previous row to ensure that we all end on the same amount of stitches as our previous row. Like I said, continue to repeat these 2 rows with no increases and no decreases until we have a shoulder portion that can reach over to the base of our neck, and I'll meet you back right after an alternate stitch row, so along the bottom, then we can get started on our neckline together. So we are back. My shoulder portion is complete. I have a total of 20 rows. My width is roughly 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters, and now we can get started on the decrease portion of our neckline. So what we're all going to want to do from here is insert our stitch marker into any odd numbered stitch from the top where we'd like for our neckline to start to decrease. So I've inserted my stitch marker into the 19th stitch from the top. That's roughly 4 inches or 10 centimeters. And now from here we're going to do our half double crochet row all the way up. So since we should all be along the bottom, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work. Remembering that we are still skipping that first stitch, then put 1 half double crochet into every stitch until we have 3 stitches left right before our stitch marker. We made our way all the way down with our half double crochets, leaving the last 3 stitches right before our stitch marker. Now from here we're all going to do a decrease of 3 half doubles. So start with the yarn over and insert our hook into that following stitch, pull through, into the stitch right after that, which is the second to last, pull through, and then into the stitch that's right before our stitch marker, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops. Then yarn over and pull through all 5 of those loops. And now that this half double crochet row is complete, make sure that we have an even number of stitches for this row, then we can get started on the following row, so chain 2 and flip. Now we aren't going to be doing any increases or decreases into any of our alternate stitch rows. So per usual, we're going to skip that first stitch and into the next. Insert with 2 single crochets and continue on with this row till we reach the end. Then just to make sure we have the decreases down at the end of this row, we're going to chain 2, flip our work, and do our half double crochet row, remembering we are still skipping that first stitch and leaving the last 3 stitches so that we can do our decrease together. So we are back. We are nearly finished with our first 3 rows for our neckline portion. Now we should all have 1, 2, 3 stitches left, remembering that that third stitch is that chain space when we started our previous row. Now we're going to do another decrease of 3 half doubles. So yarn over. Inserting your hook into that third to last, pull through, second to last, pull through, into that last, pull through for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 5. And that's it. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have a neckline portion that can reach over to mid-chest. Then I'll meet you guys back right after an alternate stitch row, sew along the bottom, and then we can get started on the other side of our front panel. I am back. The decrease half of my neckline is complete. I have a total of 34 rows. My width is roughly 9 inches or 23 centimeters. Now we're going to do our middle row. We all should have ended along the bottom. Our middle row is just going to be a half double crochet row. So since we're along the bottom, we're going to chain 2, flip our work, remembering to skip that first stitch, then put 1 half double crochet into every stitch, and then I'll meet back at the end of this row. And as a really quick tip, this middle row should have the same amount of stitches as our previous row. Alrighty, our middle row is complete. Before we move on to the increase side of our neckline, we're all going to want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of that middle row. Now from here, we're going to get started on the following row, which is going to be our alternate stitch row. That isn't going to have any increases or decreases. So per usual, we're going to chain 2 and flip. Make your way all the way down with our alternate stitch. We should have the same amount of stitches as this middle row. Then we're going to get started on our following half double crochet row. So chain 2, flip our work. Remember to always skip that first stitch and then put 1 half double crochet into every stitch, leaving that last one. We are back with the increased side of our neckline. Now we all should have finished up our middle row. Our first row that we had on the other side of our middle row, which was our alternate stitch row with no increases and no decreases. Then our half double crochet row all the way up, leaving that last stitch. Now remember that last stitch is always going to be our chain space since we skipped the first stitch when we get started on every half double crochet row. Now this increase is going to be done pretty much the same way as the underarm portion. So into that last stitch or chain space, we're going to insert with 3 half double crochets. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. Our first increase row is complete. As a quick tip, we should have 2 more stitches than our previous row. Then from here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as our decreased rows that we have here for our neckline, making sure that we are not including that middle row. When we have the same amount of rows, I will meet you guys back so we can get started on our shoulder portion together. Alright, so we are back. The increased side of our neckline is complete. I have a total of 49 rows now. My width is roughly 13.5 inches or 34 centimeters. Now we're going to get started on the shoulder. So what we're all going to do from here is make a chain. As you guys can see, I already have mine finished up. We're all going to start by making a chain for the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we got started on the neckline, plus an additional 1 because we do need this row to end on an even number of stitches. As an example, I skipped a total of 19 stitches on this side. So on this side, I made a chain 20. Now we're going to get started on the following row. Just to get this started, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Then do our first alternate stitch set into the third chain from our hook. So here's my first, here's my second, and here is my third. Into that third chain, insert with 2 single crochets. There's 1. Into that same chain, there's 2. And continue with our alternate stitch sets all the way down. And a quick tip, we should have the same amount of stitches as the other shoulder portion. We've made our way down with our first shoulder row for this side. From here, our following row is going to be a half double crochet row with no increases and no decreases. So since we all should be along the bottom, we're going to chain 2, flip our work. Remember to skip that first stitch and 1 half double crochet into every stitch. We should have the same amount of stitches as our previous row. And from here, we're just going to continue to repeat those 2 rows until we have the same amount of shoulder rows as the first shoulder portion that we did together. Once we do, I'll meet you guys back so we can finish up with our underarm. We are back. My second shoulder is complete. My width is now roughly 15.5 inches or 40 centimeters. From here, we're going to do our underarm. What we're all going to start with is insert our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made that led up to our shoulder, minus 1. Now we're doing this because we do still need to end on an even number of stitches, so just to do this together, I made a chain of 18 that led all the way up to my shoulder. So along this side, I inserted my stitch marker into my 17th stitch from the top. Now from here, we're going to do our following half double crochet row since we're all along the bottom. So what we're going to do from here is chain 2, flip our work. Remember to skip that first stitch because this is our half double crochet row, and we're going to be putting 1 half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3 stitches right before our stitch marker. So our first underarm row is nearly finished. We should have put 1 half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3. Now what we're going to do is yarn over, insert our hook into that third to last, pull through, second to last, pull through, last, pull through for a total of 5 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 5. Now from here, we're going to do our following alternate stitch row without any increases or decreases, so we should all pretty much know how to do this by now. What we're going to do is just continue to repeat those 2 rows until we have the same amount of rows as our first underarm portion. When we do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back. I am back and the entirety of my front panel is complete. Now I have a total width of roughly 19 inches or 48 centimeters, and now we're going to get started on the back panel. The back panel is going to be done pretty much the same way as the front panel, but without any of the increases or decreases within the middle. So I'm just going to talk you guys through it. What we're going to do is start off making the same exact chain and do the same underarm as the front panel. We're then going to make the same chain that led all the way up to our shoulder. Then we're going to continue on with our half double and alternate stitch row with absolutely no increases and no decreases, working our way across our back for the same amount of rows as our first shoulder row, all the way across to our last shoulder row. Then we're going to repeat our second underarm portion that we just finished up together, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back. We are back. The entirety of our back panel is now complete. Now from here, we're going to seam the front and back panel together, so we're all going to start by placing our front panel on top of our back panel. But really quickly, our row sequence is going to have a front and a back. So you guys get to choose which one you'd like to show. And whichever side you would like to be on the outside, you're going to place those 2 sides facing each other so that our seams are going to be along the inside once one's flipped right side out. And for those of you that are curious about which side I chose the side that showed the front of the half double crochet rows. Then we're going to be inserting our hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel because we're going to get started with seaming the shoulder first. So now that our hook is in through both the front and the back panel, we're going to start with our single crochet seam. So go ahead and insert your yarn onto your hook. We're going to pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then from here, all we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into every side row, working in through both the front and the back panel at the same time. So let's all start by finding our first side row within the front panel. It should be a side alternate stitch row for everyone, so find that top loop and insert your hook. We're then going to find the same top loop within the back panel, insert your hook in through there, and then single crochet around everything. There we go. And now to do the following side row, everyone's following side row should be a side half double crochet row. So we're going to find that top loop and insert your hook within the front panel. Find the next top loop within the half double crochet row within the back panel, insert your hook in through there, and now we're going to single crochet them together. And that's it. We're just going to continue to single crochet into both the front and the back panel till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. Alright, we are back. Both of our shoulder seams are complete. Now we're going to seam our sides. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is still flipped wrong side out, meaning the seam that we did for the shoulder is still along the outside. Then we're going to be inserting our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Now we're going to do another single crochet seam. So insert your yarn onto your hook and pull through with a chain up of 1. Then start by finding that first stitch into that front panel, next stitch into the back panel, and single crochet. Once more, next stitch into the front panel, next stitch into the back panel, and single crochet, and continue this to reach the end of the row. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. Alrighty, so now that everything is all seamed up, the next thing we're going to do is our sleeve. So first things first, we're all going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to be inserting our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam within the armhole, and we're going to start with our single crochet row. So we're going to start with doing our single crochet row, working our way up our underarm. So we're all going to start by inserting our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 just to secure. And we're going to start with putting 2 single crochets into every side half double and 1 single crochet into every side alternate stitch row. So everyone's first side row should be a side half double crochet row. So all I'm going to do is find that top loop and insert with 2 single crochets. So there is my first single crochet, and then into that same top loop with a second single crochet. Then into my following side row, which is our side alternate stitch row, I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1. Let's do this again. My next side row is a side half double, so I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 2 singles. And my next side row is a side alternate stitch row, so just find that top loop and insert with just 1. And we're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more side rows left, and then I'll meet you guys back when we're about to work our way up our shoulder. Alright, so we've made our way up our underarm portion with our single crochet row. Now from here we're going to work our way up the shoulder portion until we reach our shoulder seam. Now, this portion of our armhole is going to be a little bit different for everyone. What we're all going to want to do is just put 1 single crochet into every stitch until we're worked into the last stitch right before our shoulder seam, but this does need to be in multiples of 3. So if you guys need to add an extra stitch or 2 or take away a stitch or 2, it's completely up to you how many single crochets you have here. We're just going to continue that until we have a multiple of 3 single crochets, and then I will meet you guys back when we're about to work into the first stitch on the other side of our shoulder seam. So we've made our way all the way up to our shoulder seam. Into the last single crochet that we did, we're all going to want to insert a stitch marker into that last stitch so that we know where our 2 middle stitches are going to be. Then from here, we're going to single crochet our way down the other side of our shoulder portion, and the other side of the shoulder portion needs to have the same amount of stitches that we just did over here. But working into the other side, it may be a little bit different because we did skip some stitches or skip some chains when we're getting started on the underarm portion. So just as an example, if you added an extra stitch on this side, you may not necessarily add an extra stitch on the other side. If your numbers are a little bit off, that's completely fine. You just want to make sure that you have the same amount of stitches on this side as you have on the other side. Then from there, we're just going to continue on with the rest of the row per usual. We just want to make sure that we have the same amount of stitches on both sides of our armhole. And just to move on, we're going to put 1 single crochet into that next available stitch on the other side of our shoulder seam, and then insert a stitch marker into there. So just finding that first stitch on the other side of our shoulder seam. This is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert, and then make sure to insert a stitch marker into there so we know where our 2 middle stitches are. Continue on with the rest of this single crochet row, slip stitch into that chain space, and then I'll meet you guys back to get started on the length of our sleeve. So the entirety of our single crochet row is complete. We do have the same amount of stitches on both sides of our stitch marker, and now from here we're going to get started on the length of our sleeve. So what we're all going to do is make an even number chain the length that we'd like for our sleeve to be. I'd like for mine to be a full length sleeve, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 80, and that's roughly 18 inches or 45 centimeters. Then from here we're going to get started on our first row, which is a half double crochet row. So block off that last chain, do a chain 2, yarn over and into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, insert with a half double crochet, and from here put 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. We've made our way down with our first row, and into that last chain we're going to insert. So these increases are going to be done pretty much the same way as all of our other increases so far. Now that we're finished with this row, we're going to connect it into the base. Now the direction that we're going to connect it into the base is going to be completely up to you and what side of the piece that you would like to show. So for those of you that would like to show the front of the half double crochets for the body and the sleeve, we're going to make sure that one, our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, and we are going to be inserting our hook into the base clockwise or to the left. But for those of you that would like to show the back of the half double crochets, y'all are going to be inserting your hook to the right or counterclockwise, but the technique is going to be exactly the same. Now once we know which direction we're going to be inserting our hook into, what we're going to do is count up the next 2 available stitches. Here's 1, here's 2. Into that second stitch, we're going to insert with a slip stitch to connect this first row. And that's it. Now we're just going to work our way up to the following row, which is going to be our alternate stitch row. So just finding that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. None of those slip stitches into the base count as a stitch. Then from here, we're all going to chain 1. That is not actually going to count as a stitch, and we're going to flip our work. And now from here, we're going to do our alternate stitch per usual. So we're going to skip that first stitch from our previous row and into the next, insert with our first alternate stitch row, and we're going to continue on with this, making our way all the way down. Now for this row, we should end up with the same amount of stitches as our previous row. Then from here, it's going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows until we reach our stitch marker stitch along the top. So just to make sure that we all know how to connect it into the base, at the end of this row, we're going to chain 2, flip our work, and just like for the body, we're going to skip that first stitch and put 1 half double crochet into every stitch, and I'll meet you back when we have 1 stitch left, or that chain space, so we can do our increase and then connect it into the base together once more. Alright, so we are back. Our row 2, which was our alternate stitch row, is complete, and we did make our way all the way down with our half double crochet row as well. We did leave that last stitch, which is actually that chain space that we made when we got started on our previous row. Now we're going to do the same increase, so an increase of 3 half double crochets into that chain space. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3 half double crochets. And just as a really quick tip, every half double crochet row should have 2 more stitches than our previous row. Now we're going to connect it into the base the same way that we did for the row 1. So start by counting up the next 2 available stitches. There's 1, there's 2, slip stitch into that second stitch into the base to connect this row. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base. None of those slip stitches into the base count as a stitch. We're going to chain 1 and flip our work. And then we're going to repeat our alternate stitch row. So just skip that first stitch from our previous row, making sure that we're not counting any of those slip stitches, into the second with 2 single crochets, and we're just going to continue on with this to reach the end of the row. Then from here, continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we are worked into our first stitch marker stitch. Then I will meet you guys back so we can get started on the decrease side of our sleeve. So we are back. The increase side of our sleeve is complete. Now we're going to repeat basically everything that we did here on the other side, but instead of increases, we're going to be doing decreases. So all we're going to do is just do the following row in our row sequence. So for those of you that have ended along the base like me, your following row is going to be your alternate stitch row, remembering that that doesn't have any increases or decreases, so go ahead and get that row finished. For those of you that have ended along the outer edge, we're going to get started on the following half double crochet row. So we're going to chain 2, flip our work. Remember, we do need to skip that first stitch and then put 1 half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3. And we do need to make sure that we're remembering that the last 3 is the second to last, the last, and then the chain space, so that we can do a decrease of 3 half double crochets together. Alright, so we are back. We have just finished up the half double crochet row for the decrease side of our sleeve. We have left the last 3 stitches. Here is 1, 2, and then 3 is that chain space from our previous row. Now we're going to do a decrease of 3 half doubles. So yarn over. Into that third to last, pull through, second to last, pull through, and then into that last, which is that chain space, pull through for 5 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 5, and connecting it into the base is going to be done the same way. So we're going to count up the next 2 stitches, slip stitch into there, and then our following row is going to be an alternate stitch row, so slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, chain 1, flip our work, and then do our alternate stitch row, making our way all the way down. Now every half double crochet row is going to have 2 less stitches than our previous row, and we're just going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Then I'll meet you guys back so we can seam everything together. Alright, so we are back. The decrease height of our sleeve is complete. Now from here, we're going to do a single crochet seam. Now the single crochet seam is going to be done exactly the same way that we did the side. So just to talk you guys through it, we're going to flip our work wrong side out, meaning all of the seams are now going to be along the outside, then do our single crochet seam till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Now just as a really quick tip, for the decrease side, we could either have the same amount of stitches as chains that we made when we got started on our sleeve, or we could have 2 additional stitches. Those 2 additional stitches comes from the type of decreases that we did, but that's completely fine if we do. Go ahead and just continue on with the seam per usual. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back to get started on the cuff. We are back. Now that everything's all seamed up, we're ready to get started on our cuff. So first things first, let's all make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to be inserting our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the edge of our sleeve. All we're going to do is insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then we're just going to be putting 1 single crochet into every other side row. So I'm going to start by finding my first side row, and this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop, insert my hook in through there with a single crochet. Now this is my following side row. I'm going to skip that top loop, and then into the top of my next side row, insert a single crochet into there as well. And that's basically it. We're going to continue to put 1 single crochet into every other side row till we make our way all the way around. Now that we've made our way all the way around with our single crochet row, we're going to slip stitch it into that chain space that we made, and then we're going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our cuff to be. Now I'd like for mine to be roughly 3 inches or 8 centimeters, so I went ahead and made a chain 12. Now that we have our chain, we're going to get started on our first row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. So insert your hook. When we have those 2 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through everything on our hook, just like that. Let's do this again. Into that next chain, insert, yarn over, gently pull through everything, and once more, into that next chain, insert, pull through everything. Continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain, and we do want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row can be a little too tight to work into. Now that we've put 1 slip stitch into every chain, we're now going to connect it into the base. So start by finding that next available stitch into the base, and just slip stitch it into there to connect that first row. Now that slip stitch into the base doesn't count as a stitch. Now to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, still doesn't count as a stitch. Flip our work, and now put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So finding that first stitch from our previous row, not into any of those slip stitches into the base, find that back loop, and pull through everything, remembering still to pull gently through. And we're just going to continue doing this until we reach the end of the row. Now when we reach the end of the row, just to make sure that we know how to connect it into the base together, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and then I'll meet you back at the base just once more. We are back. Our first 3 rows are complete. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So start by finding that next available stitch into the base, slip stitch it into there. Now our row 3 is complete. Then, just to work our way up to the following row, since we're already here, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and that is it. We're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows with no increases and no decreases until we don't have any more stitches into the base left to work into. When we don't, I will meet you guys back so we can seam it all up together. We are back. We've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. Now what we're going to do from here is just do our outside loop slip stitch seam to connect it. So what we're going to do, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to insert our hook into the first stitch into the front, first stitch into the back panel, and then we're going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And just to do the first few together, we're all going to start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert only in through that front loop. Find that next stitch into the back panel and insert only in through that back loop. Then when we have those 3 loops on our hook, we're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. Again, find the first stitch into the front panel, insert your hook, first stitch into the back panel, insert your hook into that back loop, and pull through all 3, and that is it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat everything we did here on the other side. Alright, so now that both of our sleeves and cuffs are all finished up, the last thing we're going to do, well, one of the last things we're going to do is our bottom band. So that's going to be done pretty much the same way as the cuffs. I'm just going to mainly talk you guys through it. We're all going to start by making sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to be inserting our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our piece. Then for this single crochet row, we're going to be putting one single crochet into every side row. So just insert your yarn onto your hook, put one single crochet into every side row, making your way all the way around. Well, we don't have any more side rows left to work into, slip stitch into that chain space. So we are back. Our single crochet row along the bottom of our piece is complete. Now from here, we're going to be doing back loop slip stitch rows the same exact way that we did the cuffs, making our way all the way around, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it really quickly. Since we just slip stitched into that chain space, we're all going to start by making a chain the length that we'd like for our bottom band to be. Now I'd like for mine to be roughly 5 inches or 13 centimeters, so I'm going to start off by making a chain 20, then just do my back loop slip stitch rows, connecting it into the base the same way that we've been doing until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Then I'll meet you guys back so we can seam it together. We are back. Our bottom band is complete. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're just going to seam it together, and I actually already did my seam because it's going to be the same exact seam that we did for the cuff. So just to talk you guys through it, we're all going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to do our outside loop slip stitch seam so we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. Now that our bottom band is complete, the last thing we're going to do is just clean up our neckline. So first things first, we're all going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then taking a look at the back panel, we're all going to insert our hook into any one of the side rows along the top of the neckline, and we're going to do a single crochet row. So this is going to be fairly simple. I'm just going to talk you guys through it. We're all going to start with putting one single crochet into every side row, working our way across the top of our neckline within the back panel. Then when it comes to doing the front panel, we're going to put one single crochet into every stitch, making our way down our shoulder. Then into the V-neck portion of our neckline, all we're going to do is alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. We do need to have a couple more stitches into the increase and decrease rows because that's just a little bit more space to fill in. So like I said, one single crochet into one side row, 2 single crochet into the next side row, making our way all the way down and then back up, then one single crochet into every stitch, then slip stitch into that chain space. Okay, so our single crochet row is complete, and as you guys can tell, I did do another single crochet row, but that's going to be super duper simple. All we're going to do is just continue working in the same direction that we're working in, and just put one back loop single crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way around. That's how we get this really pretty ribbing that we have along the neckline. And that's it. Once we have that, slip stitch into that chain space, do a chain up 1 and cut, and then we're all done. And there you have it. We are all finished. Now the last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, y'all. Hope you guys enjoy the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye.